on the rust-colored dunes of Varelia, where twin suns baked the sand into glass by noon and the wind carried whispers of ancient wars, a lone human sat wrapped in silence. His name was Joran Vel, once a decorated soldier of the Earth Concord, now just a man with too many memories and too few reasons to stay. His armor, once gleaming, was dulled by dust and time. His plasma rifle lay across his lap like a sleeping companion. He'd come to this desert planet not for glory, not for coin, but because it was far enough from everywhere else that the ghosts in his head might finally quiet down. Yet even here, in the scorched emptiness between sky and stone, peace remained just out of reach, until the day a small shape appeared on the horizon, moving fast, weaving between dune crests like a spark of wildfire. She couldn't have been more than 7 cycles old, if Joran had to guess by human reckoning. Her skin shimmered like pearled alabaster under the twin suns, smooth and faintly scaled at the temples, and her hair blazed in thick, untamed curls the color of molten tangerine. 2 slender horns curved gently from her temples, delicate as ivory twigs, and her eyes, wide and luminous, glowed faintly amber, like twin embers shielded behind glass. She wore a tattered tunic stitched from starship sailcloth, her bare feet blistered and dust-caked, but she ran toward him without hesitation, as if he were a beacon she'd been searching for across galaxies. "Mister!" she called out, voice cracking with urgency and exhaustion. She skidded to a halt before him, chest heaving, eyes wide with desperate hope. "Mommy Dragon is sick, but she'll smile if you come." Joran blinked. He hadn't spoken to another soul in weeks, let alone a child, let alone an alien child who called her mother a dragon. He opened his mouth to ask a question, but the girl didn't wait. She grabbed his gloved hand with both of hers, her tiny fingers surprisingly strong, and tugged him toward the eastern ridge. "Please, you smell like courage." Mommy said courage smells like rain before lightning. "You're the only one who can help." He should have refused. He had no medical training, no allegiance to this world, no desire to get tangled in someone else's sorrow. But something in the way she looked at him, not with fear, not with awe, but with absolute unshaken belief, pierced the armor around his heart like a needle through old leather. With a sigh that stirred the dust at his boots, Joran rose, slung his pack over his shoulder, and followed. The path led them through a labyrinth of wind-sculpted canyons, past petrified forests of crystal trees, and finally down into a hidden basin where the air grew cooler and scented with ozone and something faintly floral, like burnt jasmine. At the basin's heart stood a half-buried starship, ancient and organic-looking, its hull not metal but something closer to bone or obsidian shell, veined with pulsing blue light. It had crash-landed generations ago, perhaps, and over time the Varelians had woven their lives around it like roots around a stone. Now it served as both home and sanctuary. Inside, the corridors curved like ribcages, and bioluminescent moss painted the walls in soft, shifting hues. The little girl, whose name Joran would soon learn was Nira, led him without pause to the deepest chamber. There, on a nest of woven thermal blankets and salvaged ship fabric, lay a woman who stole his breath away. She was tall even lying down, her frame powerful yet softened by weariness. Her skin matched Nira's, pale, luminous white, but marked with faint, swirling patterns that glowed faintly when she stirred. Her hair, longer and straighter than her daughter's, spilled over her shoulders like molten gold threaded with fire. Her horns were larger, arched like a crown, and her wings, oh, her wings were folded tightly against her back, tattered at the edges, their membranes veined with faint light that now pulsed weakly. She was clearly feverish, her breathing shallow, her skin too hot to the touch even from a distance. "Lasara," Nira whispered, kneeling beside her. "I found him." The soldier with rain-smell courage. The woman's eyelids fluttered open. Her eyes were deeper amber than her daughter's, ringed with exhaustion, but they held an intelligence that sharpened the moment they landed on Joran. She didn't speak at first. She simply studied him, the lines on his face, the weight in his stance, the way his hand hovered near his sidearm even now. "You're not from the Concord patrols," she said finally, her voice husky but clear, each word deliberate. "No," Joran replied. "I'm nobody." "You're somebody to me?" Nira piped up, clutching her mother's hand. "He came right away." Lasara managed a faint, wry smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Of course he did. You have a way of making even strangers feel like they've known you forever." She turned back to Joran. "I'm sorry to drag you into this. My daughter. She doesn't understand the danger." What danger? Joran asked, stepping closer despite himself. Lasara's expression tightened. Fever sickness. Not just any, it's the Void Blight, a pathogen that drifted in on a comet fragment 6 months ago. It targets our kind specifically, weakens the neural network that keeps our bioluminal system stable. Without treatment, it burns out our core light, and then we go dark. She paused, swallowing hard. There's an antidote, synthesized from Varelian sky moss and Concord-grade nanites. But the nearest supply is in the citadel of Solketh. And I can't fly. Not anymore. Joran's stomach dropped. Solketh was a fortified city 200 clicks east, controlled by the very Concord forces he'd deserted. Worse, it was crawling with enforcers who'd recognize his biometrics the second he stepped inside. You want me to go there? He asked. I want you to live your life, Lasara said, her voice softening. But if you're willing, Nira's too young to make the journey alone. And I won't last another week. Nira buried her face against her mother's arm, silent tears tracing paths through the dust on her cheeks. Joran looked from mother to daughter, and for the first time in years, he felt something stir inside him. Not duty, not guilt, but purpose. Not the kind that came with medals and commendations, but the quiet, stubborn kind that made you walk into fire for people you barely knew. I'll go, he said. Lasara's eyes widened. You don't even know us. I know enough, he replied. The journey began at dawn. Nira insisted on coming. I know shortcuts the San-WRMs use, and after a tense argument with her mother, Lasara relented, but only after pressing a smooth, warm stone into Joran's palm. It's a resonance shard, she explained. If either of you are in mortal danger, crush it. I'll feel it, and I'll come, even if I have to crawl. Joran didn't have the heart to tell her she probably couldn't. They traveled light. 2 canteens of filtered dew, a pouch of dried sky lizard jerky, and Joran's old military-grade holomap, its battery flickering but functional. Nira proved surprisingly capable. She could track sand vipers by the tremor in their tails, knew which cacti held drinkable sap, and sang weird, lilting songs that made the desert birds fall silent in reverence. She talked constantly, filling the silence Joran usually cherished. Mommy used to be a sky dancer, she told him one evening as they camped beneath a sky thick with stars. She'd ride the thermal winds without wings, just her will and the wind and her light. People came from all over to watch her spin above the glass peaks. She sounds incredible, Joran said, poking the small fire with a stick. She is, Nira said firmly. But she got hurt protecting our nest ship when the Concord dropped the sonic mines. She never danced again. Joran winced. He remembered those mines. Standard issue during the Varelian pacification campaign. He'd deployed them himself once. You okay? Nira asked, peering at him with those 2 knowing eyes. Just tired, he lied. But that night he dreamed of falling. Not from the sky, but from grace. Of children with white skin and orange hair screaming in silence as the ground trembled beneath sonic pulses. He woke gasping, sweat cooling on his brow. Nira curled up beside him like a sun-warmed cat. On the 3rd day, they reached the salt flats of Kor, a vast expanse of cracked white earth that shimmered under the suns like a broken mirror. It was the fastest route to Solketh, but also the most exposed. And as Joran scanned the horizon with his monocular, his blood ran cold. Patrol skiffs, 3 of them hovering low, their engines humming like angry hornets. Concord markings glinted on their flanks. Standard recon sweep, but if they scanned him, his old service tag would ping like a dinner bell. Get down, he hissed, pulling Nira behind a salt ridge. She obeyed instantly, her eyes wide but calm. What do we do? Joran's mind raced. He had minimal ammo, no backup, and a child depending on him. Running was suicide, skiffs were faster. Fighting was worse. Then he remembered something Lasara had said. San-WRMs avoid the salt flats. Except during molting season. And it was molting season. Hold your breath, he whispered, pulling a small canister from his belt. Thermoil, used for cleaning plasma coils. He smashed it against the ground, releasing a cloud of acrid vapor. To humans, it stung the eyes. To Varelian San-WRMs, it mimicked the scent of a dying WRM, a dinner bell of their own. Within minutes, the ground began to tremble. Not from skiffs, but from below. A massive shape erupted from the salt crust, 20 meters long, armored in iridescent plates, its maw lined with rotating teeth. The skiffs veered sharply, alarms blaring across the flats. Now, Joran grabbed Nira's hand and ran. They didn't stop until the skiffs were dots on the horizon and the sand WRM had vanished back into the earth, sated or confused. Nira was shaking, but she laughed. A breathless, giddy sound that made Joran's chest ache. "You're crazy," she gasped. "Yeah," he said, grinning despite himself. "But we're alive." By the 5th day, Solketh loomed ahead, a fortress of black alloy and solar spires, its gates guarded by chrome-plated sentinels. Joran's stomach twisted. He'd walked through those gates as a conqueror. Now he returned as a thief, a deserter, maybe a fool. But Nira squeezed his hand. "You smell like rain," she whispered. "And lightning's coming." They slipped in through the old drainage tunnels. Joran remembered them from his patrols. Inside, the city was colder than he remembered, sterile and humming with surveillance drones. The medical depot was in Sector Gamma, guarded by 2 biolock doors. Joran's old clearance codes were revoked, but he still had a trick or two. "Wait here," he told Nira, hiding her behind a coolant pipe. He approached the first guard, a fresh-faced recruit, barely older than Nira looked. "Hey," Joran said, voice low and calm. "You've got a leak in your coolant line. Smells like plasma burn." The guard frowned. "Where?" "Right behind you." As the guard turned, Joran struck. Fast, precise, non-lethal. The boy crumpled. Same with the second. He felt a pang. Not of guilt, but of sorrow. He'd trained these kids. Now he was knocking them out like sacks of grain. Inside the depot, rows of cryovials glowed in refrigerated shelves. He found the Void Blight antidote labeled VX7, just as alarms began to wail. They'd found the guards. "Nira, run!" he yelled, grabbing the case. She was already sprinting, her small legs pumping like pistons. They burst onto the street just as skiffs descended, spotlights cutting through the dusk. Shots rang out, non-lethal pulse rounds, meant to stun. Joran shoved Nira behind a hovercart and returned fire with his sidearm, buying time. But then, from the sky, came a sound like thunder-made song. A roar. Not human, not machine. Wings, massive, luminous, tearing through the twilight. Lasara. She shouldn't have been able to fly. She was supposed to be dying. But there she was, wings blazing with unstable light, eyes wild with maternal fury. She dove like a comet, scattering skiffs with bursts of bioluminal energy, her voice shaking the very walls. "Joran! Nira! To me!" Joran didn't hesitate. He scooped Nira into his arms and sprinted toward the descending figure. Lasara landed hard, one wing buckling beneath her, but she held out her arms. "Give her to me," she gasped. He did. And then, with a strength that defied her sickness, Lasara leapt skyward, Nira clinging to her neck. "Hold on," she cried to Joran. He grabbed her outstretched hand just as pulse rounds sizzled past his back. The world fell away beneath him as Lasara soared upward, her wings straining, her body trembling with effort. Behind them, Solketh shrank into the dusk, its alarms fading like a bad dream. They didn't stop until they reached the hidden basin. Lasara collapsed the moment her feet touched the ship's deck, coughing, her light flickering dangerously. But Nira was already uncapping the antidote, her small hands steady. "Open your mouth, Mommy," she said, voice firm with a maturity far beyond her years. Lasara obeyed. The serum glowed as it entered her system, and slowly, surely, her light began to steady. Color returned to her cheeks. Her breathing deepened. And when she looked up at Joran, her eyes held not just gratitude, but something warmer, something quieter. "You came back," she whispered. "I had help," he said, nodding to Nira. Nira beamed, then suddenly threw her arms around Joran's waist. "You stayed. You stayed through the sand WRMS and the skiffs and the scary city. You're part of the nest now." Joran stiffened. I can't stay. I've got enemies. Baggage." "I'm not." "Not what?" Lasara interrupted, rising slowly to her feet, her strength returning with every breath. "Not worthy? Not safe? Or just not ready to be loved again?" He had no answer. She stepped closer, her luminous eyes holding his. "You carried my daughter through fire. You risked everything for a stranger. That's not nobody, Joran. That's a hero. And heroes deserve a home." Outside, the twin suns dipped below the dunes, painting the sky in violet and copper. Inside the ancient ship, the bioluminescent moss brightened, as if welcoming a new member to its silent, steady family. Nira tugged Joran's hand again. But this time it wasn't urgency in her grip. It was belonging. And for the first time in longer than he could remember, Joran Vel didn't pull away. He stayed. He helped Lasara rebuild the ship's failing systems, using old engineering tricks from his soldier days. He taught Nira how to throw a knife. For protection, not for hurting. And she taught him the songs that called rain to the desert. He stood guard during Lasara's healing meditations, her wings slowly mending under the care of both science and time. And when raiders from the outer wastes tried to steal their water tanks one moonless night, Joran didn't just fight them off. He made sure they left with enough supplies to survive, too. Mercy, Lasara asked afterward, watching him bandage a cut on his forearm. Compassion, he corrected. There's a difference. She smiled then, a real smile, warm and deep, the kind that reaches the soul. And Joran realized, with a quiet shock, that he was smiling too. Weeks turned to months. The ship became a true home, filled with laughter and shared meals and stories told under starlight. Nira started calling him Papa Joran. At first tentatively, then with joyous certainty. Lasara never pushed, never demanded. He was free to leave whenever he wished. But each morning he woke with the scent of sky herb tea and the sound of Nira practicing her wind calls. And each morning he chose to stay. One evening, as they sat on the ship's upper deck watching the auroras ripple across the sky, Lasara turned to him. You once told me you were nobody, she said softly. I was wrong, he admitted. You're Joran Vel, she said. Veteran, protector, father, and, if you'll have us, more. He looked at her, really looked, at the strength in her posture, the warmth in her eyes, the way her light now pulsed in rhythm with his heartbeat. And he saw not just a woman, not just a dragon, but a future. I'm yours, he said simply, and she kissed him. Not like a warrior, not like a queen, but like someone who had waited lifetimes to find her missing piece. Years later, when travelers passed through the basin, they'd speak of a strange but beautiful family living in the old starship. A human man with kind eyes and calloused hands. A dragon woman whose wings shimmered like dawn fire. And their children, 3 of them, each with white skin, orange curls, and the uncanny ability to make even the fiercest sand worm purr like a kitten. The eldest, a girl named Kira, could already call down rain from clear skies. The twins, boys named Rel and Tavi, could run so fast they left afterimages in the dust. And Joran? He never wore armor again. But he kept his old plasma rifle, not as a weapon but as a reminder of the man he'd been, and the home he'd found not by running away, but by walking toward someone who needed him. Because sometimes, all it takes to heal a broken soul is a little dragon girl saying, Mommy Dragon is sick, but she'll smile if you come. The peace in the basin lasted 3 full cycles. Long enough for the ship's bioluminescent veins to brighten with renewed energy. Long enough for Joran to teach his children how to track sand rabbits by moonlight. Long enough for Lasara to dance again, her wings carving arcs of golden light above the dunes. But on the morning of the 4th cycle, the sky cracked open. It wasn't a storm. It was a ship, massive, obsidian black, shaped like a scorpion's tail coiled around a dying star. No markings, no hails. It simply hung in the atmosphere, silent and watchful, casting a shadow that swallowed the twin suns. Nira, now 12, her horns longer, her voice steadier, was the first to feel it. She'd been practicing her resonance calls near the eastern ridge when she froze, her amber eyes widening in terror. It's not Concord, she whispered. It's older, much older. Lasara sensed it too. Her luminal patterns flickered erratically, a sign of ancestral alarm. The Voidborn, she murmured, pulling Joran and the children close. They're real. Joran had heard the legends whispered by desert elders, of a nomadic faction that predated the Concord, scavengers of dead worlds who fed on bioluminal energy. They didn't conquer, they consumed. And now, drawn by the resurgence of Lasara's light, or perhaps by the unique hybrid signatures of their children, they had come. That night, while the twins slept and Kira kept watch with her rain call humming softly, Lasara revealed the truth. The Void Blight wasn't a comet pathogen, she confessed, her voice low. It was a weapon, left behind by the Voidborn centuries ago to weaken dragon-blooded clans. They return when the sickness flares, to harvest the survivors. Joran's blood ran cold. So your illness? It was bait. She nodded. And our healing a signal. Before dawn, the attack came, not with bombs or skiffs, but with silence. Figures clad in void-weave cloaks moved like smoke across the dunes, their faces hidden behind masks that absorbed light. They didn't shoot. They reached. With gloved hands, they tried to siphon Lysara's luminal energy through touch. One grazed Kira's arm, and the girl screamed as her glow dimmed for 3 terrifying seconds. Joran didn't hesitate. He activated the ship's last defense, a sonic resonator buried in its core, originally meant for asteroid deflection. The pulse sent the intruders reeling, their cloaks shredding like ash. But as they retreated, one turned and raised a device that looked like a twisted flute. A single note pierced the air, sharp, ancient, wrong. Lysara collapsed, not from pain, from memory. Her eyes rolled back, and she began speaking in a language Joran had never heard. Guttural, melodic, layered with harmonics that made the ship's walls vibrate. Nira gasped. The blood song. They're trying to awaken her ancestral bond. What bond? Joran demanded, catching Lysara as she thrashed. The first pact, Nira whispered, tears streaming. Long ago, our ancestors made a covenant with the Voidborn, a truce. In exchange for safe passage, dragon-blooded clans would never interfere with their harvests. Mom broke that pact when she healed using Concord nanites. Now they're reclaiming her. Joran's mind raced. He couldn't fight an enemy that weaponized history, but he could rewrite it. He turned to Kira. Can you call more than rain? She blinked. I think so. The sky listens. Then make it scream. While Lysara chanted under the Voidborn's influence, Joran and the children worked feverishly. Using salvaged Concord tech and Lysara's resonance shards, they modified the ship's core into a counterharmonic emitter. Nira wove her mother's old Skydancer frequencies into the code. Rel and Tavi rerouted power from the life support systems, and Kira climbed to the highest spire, her small hands raised to the heavens. As the obsidian ship descended for final retrieval, Kira unleashed her call. Not rain, not wind, thunder made of song. A sonic storm erupted from the basin. Pure, resonant defiance, tuned to the exact frequency of Lysara's soul. The Voidborn's flute shattered. Their cloaks burned away, and Lysara screamed, not in submission, but in liberation. Her wings blazed brighter than ever, not with illness, but with ancestral fury. She rose into the air, not as a victim, but as a queen. You break the pact, she roared, her voice shaking the stars. When you forget that dragons do not give, we take back. She unleashed a pulse of raw luminal energy so powerful it cracked the obsidian ship's hull. It didn't explode. It unraveled, its structure dissolving into stardust as the Voidborn fled into the void, their ancient arrogance shattered. Silence returned. But the victory was hollow. Lysara landed gently, her light dimming rapidly. The countersong, "It cost me," she whispered, collapsing into Joran's arms. My core is unstable. The void blight may be gone, but the damage, it's deeper. Joran refused to accept it. He remembered something from his Concord days, a rumor of the Aurora Vault, a hidden archive beneath the glass peaks, said to hold the original Dragonblood genome. If it existed, it might hold the key to true healing. But the glass peaks were sacred, forbidden to outsiders, and guarded by the Sky Sentinels, dragon-blooded purists who exiled Lysara's clan for mixing with off-world tech. We'll be killed on sight, Nira said. Then we go in peace, Joran said. This time they didn't sneak. They walked openly, the whole family, through the crystal canyons. When the sentinels appeared, tall, winged warriors with eyes like frozen suns, Joran dropped his weapons and knelt. I don't ask for mercy, he said. I ask for a chance to save the woman who saved me. The eldest sentinel, a matriarch named Vera, studied them. Her gaze lingered on the children. Their hybrid glow, their human eyes, their dragon horns. They are abominations, she declared. No, Kira said, stepping forward. We are bridges. And then she did something no one expected. She sang the blood song. Not the corrupted version, but the true one, the one Lysara had whispered in her sleep. The sentinels froze. One by one, their stern faces softened. You know the old tongue, Vera murmured. I dream it, Kira said, because my mother's heart still remembers. Moved, Vera led them into the vault. A cavern lined with living crystal, humming with ancestral memory. There, at its heart, pulsed a single seed of pure dragon light. It can restore her, Vera said, but it requires a vessel. Someone must carry its energy into her core soul. I'll do it, Joran said instantly. You are human, Vera warned. Your biology may reject it. You could burn from within. I've been burning since the day I left Earth, he replied. Let me burn for something good. The ritual was agony. The seed fused with his chest, its light searing through muscle and bone. He screamed, but he didn't stop. He held Lysara's hand as the energy flowed from him into her, their breaths syncing, their scars aligning. When it was over, Lysara's light shone steady and strong. Not just healed, but evolved. And Joran? He glowed faintly too, a soft amber radiance beneath his skin. The sentinels bowed. You are no longer outsider, Vera said. You are kin. Years passed. The family grew. New children came. 2 more daughters, their laughter ringing through the ship like wind chimes. Joran never returned to war. Instead, he and Lysara became mediators, traveling between desert clans and off-world enclaves, teaching that strength wasn't in purity, but in connection. And on quiet nights, when the twins raced sand WRMS and Kira called auroras from the sky, Joran would sit with Lysara on the deck, her head on his shoulder, her wings wrapped around them like a living cloak. You came for a sick dragon, she once said, smiling. I stayed for a universe, he replied. And far above, in the endless dark, the stars watched and approved. Time wove its quiet magic across the dunes of Varelia, stitching together human resilience and dragon grace into something neither world had seen before. The ship, once a broken relic, became a beacon. Pilgrims came from the ash wastes and the crystal highlands, not for healing or weapons, but for stories. They spoke of the human who carried starlight in his chest, the dragon queen whose wings could calm solar flares, and their children. 7 in all, born of fire, sand, and something far rarer. Stubborn, joyful love. Joran never wore armor again, but he didn't need to. His presence alone was enough to still a brawl in the bazaar of Solketh or calm a sandstorm with a single deep breath. Lysara, restored and radiant, danced not just for beauty, but as ritual, her movements weaving protective harmonies into the planet's magnetic field, shielding their home from cosmic threats even the Concord couldn't detect. And Nira, the first to find him, grew into a diplomat whose voice could soothe warlords and whisper secrets to comets. The Voidborn never returned. Some said they'd been erased. Others claimed they'd changed. Humbled by the day a hybrid child sang their ancient shame into redemption. Whatever the truth, Varelia was finally at peace. Then came the day the twin suns dimmed. Not from eclipse, but from grief. A signal crackled through the old Concord emergency band. A frequency Joran hadn't heard in decades. Earth was dying. Not from war, but from silence. A neural plague had swept through the human colonies, erasing memory, identity, the very thread of self. Billions forgotten. Cities hollowed out. The Concord had collapsed under the weight of its own ghosts. And Earth was calling, not for soldiers but for healers. Joran stood on the ship's upper deck that night, the wind tugging at his silver-streaked hair. He didn't speak for a long time. Lysara didn't need him to. She stepped beside him, her hand finding his, her light pulsing in rhythm with the steady glow beneath his skin. You're thinking of going back, she said softly. I helped break them, he replied, voice rough. Maybe I can help mend them. You're not the same man who left Earth, she reminded him. And they're not the same people who sent you to war. I know, he said, but if there's even one child sitting alone in the ruins, wondering if anyone remembers their name, then I have to try. Lysara smiled, not with sadness, but with pride. Then we go together. Not you. We. Within the week, the old ship, rebuilt, reinforced, humming with Varelian biotech and Concord engineering, lifted from the basin, its hull now etched with symbols of both worlds. A dragon coiled around a globe, wings sheltering continents. The children stood at the viewports, eyes wide with wonder, not fear. Kira held her youngest brother's hand. Rel and Tavi calibrated the resonance drive. Even the twins, now grown, broad-shouldered and sharp-eyed, stood ready not as warriors but as teachers. The journey to Earth took months. When they arrived, the planet was a ghost wrapped in green. Forests reclaiming cities, vines climbing skyscrapers, silence where music once blared. But in the ruins of old Chicago they found a camp. Not of soldiers but of survivors, elders, children, medics, tending memory gardens, whispering names into data crystals, trying to rebuild what was lost. And among them was a boy, no older than Nira had been that day in the desert, sitting alone beneath a rusted street lamp, sketching dragons in the dust. Joran knelt beside him, You've seen one before? The boy looked up, eyes wary but curious. In my dreams. She had orange hair, and she said, Mommy Dragon is sick, but she'll smile if you come. Joran's breath caught. Not a memory, a resonance, a thread of hope echoing across galaxies. He placed a hand on the boy's shoulder. Then let's go find her. What followed wasn't conquest. It was communion. Lasara and her daughters taught the survivors how to listen. To the wind, to the soil, to the faint hum of life beneath concrete. Joran and his sons shared stories, not of war, but of kindness. Of a soldier who once paid for a stranger's meal, who followed a child into danger, who chose love over escape. They built schools inside derelict arcologies, turned war drones into seed planters, and used their ship's core to purify poisoned rivers. Slowly, memory returned. Not all at once, but in fragments like rain after drought. A mother recognized her daughter's laugh. A musician found her fingers remembering a melody. And in the heart of the reclaimed city, a new tradition began. The Festival of Remembering, where humans and dragon-blooded alike lit lanterns shaped like wings and released them into the sky, each carrying a name, a hope, a promise. Years later, on the 50th anniversary of their return, the family gathered on the rooftop garden of the old Chicago Archive, now the Hall of Echoes. Joran's hair was white, his steps slower, but his eyes still held the desert's fire. Lasara's wings, though scarred, still caught the sunlight like stained glass. Around them, their children, now parents themselves, played with grandchildren who had human smiles and dragon freckles, who could summon gentle rains and recite earth poetry in the old tongue. Nira, now a revered elder, stood beside Joran and placed a small, warm stone in his palm, the original resonance shard, worn smooth by time. Do you ever miss the silence of the dunes? She asked. Joran looked out over the reborn city. Children laughing, vines blooming on steel bones, lanterns glowing in twilight. I used to think peace was the absence of noise, he said. Now I know it's the presence of love. That night, as the twin moons of Varelia rose in Earth's sky, a gift from long ago terraforming, the entire family stood together, wings and hands intertwined, watching the stars not as distant strangers, but as old friends. And in the quiet that followed, filled only with the sound of shared breath and beating hearts, Joran Vel, the soldier who once believed he was nobody, finally understood. He had not just found a home. He had helped build one, for everyone, and that, more than any medal or victory, was the happiest ending of all. Beneath a sky stitched with twin moons and ancient stars, Joran sat with Lasara on the garden ledge of the Hall of Echoes, her wings draped around them like a living blanket. Their children's laughter drifted up from below, mingling with the chime of wind-carved crystals and the soft hum of the city breathing again. Grandchildren, some with amber eyes, some with silver wings, all brimming with stories yet to be told. Chased fireflies made from recycled drone lights. The desert's silence had once been his refuge. Now, the symphony of belonging was his sanctuary. He no longer dreamt of war, only of small hands planting seeds in healed earth. Lasara leaned her head on his shoulder, her glow steady, warm, eternal. You came for a sick dragon, she whispered, smiling. And stayed for a universe, he answered, kissing her temple. Around them, Earth and Varelia had not just coexisted. They had woven into something new, something tender and unbreakable. The Voidborn were gone. The Concord was ash. But love had multiplied. In classrooms, in songs, in the way strangers now shared water without asking. Nira joined them, placing a single sky lily in Joran's lap, a flower that only bloomed where kindness took root. He held it gently, heart full, eyes clear. No ghosts remained, only grace.